Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel, I expect we're going to enjoy today's show.
I think the odds are really good at that.
Especially since we're talking about expectation.
Sure.
You know where this came from, right?
Probably one of my posts.
It did come from one of your posts, yes. Yeah. You posted a message attributed to Shakespeare. Expectation is the root of all heartache. By the way, just so you know, I looked it up. He didn't actually say it. But it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting statement. In part, because it kind of flies in the face of what we often talk about, which is your expectation is actually going to drive your experience.
Sure.
So interesting juxtaposition going on there. On the one hand, it drives your experience. On the other hand, the root of all heartache.
I love, and of course, you know, I love stuff like this. So the nuance here is the expectation of others is where heartache lies. When you're constantly having expectations of other people to behave a certain way. Esther Hicks speaks a lot in both Asking is Given and the Law of Attraction about you're wanting people to do what you want them to do. You know, most people attack the law of attraction saying, well, I really want my son to do this, and that's what I'm trying to, and it doesn't work that way. So expectations in relationships and jobs, expectations in friends, those are things that almost always let you down. You get resentments, you very seldom are they fulfilled. Most people's expectations, you know, I try not to have expectations of others. The law of attraction version of expectations is I have expectations of success, which are driven by me, by the way, expectations of good health, expectations of, you know, quality relationships, not by the other person, but by me bringing them to it. There's a difference. When you're expecting others to do something the way you believe they have to do it, you're almost always going to be let down. Or waiting for the call from that friend to, oh, well, I didn't get invited to that party. I was expecting to get invited to that. That's when it goes the other way. There's two sides to expectations, like most things. And expectations of other people almost always are the underlying cause of resentment and heartache. Now, expectations of what you want for yourself, that's all in on that. I expect optimal performance out of myself. I expect, you know, I have a great work ethic. I expect continued good health, continued success. I told you right before the show, today is one of those days that I know everything's always going to work out, but I had like 3 or 4 minor things I thought I was going to have to do a lot about. Just all fixed themselves today, just randomly.
Nice. Those are fun when that happens.
Yeah, just automatically filled in the blank. Oh, okay, so I worried about that for nothing. I didn't really worry, but I thought about it, and I thought I was going to have to put effort toward, you know, getting a remedy toward that. But no, they just sort of solve themselves. So the expectations that we have in other people is what we're trying to avoid. Expectations in ourselves, our future, our health, what we attract, our abundance. Those are things we want to be I expect success. The presidential election is coming up, in case you weren't aware of that. And you know,
that's for the one listener who is not aware.
And my stance has always been, no matter who wins, I'm expecting to continue success. I'm expecting no matter what happens, I will continue to thrive. It's not dependent on somebody else.
Yes, I'm glad you clarified it that way, and I love the way you clarified. The fact is of expectation about what somebody else is going to do being the basis for your feeling of how you feel about your life, how you feel about yourself, and so forth. Yeah, that's really not a great formula for success right there. Now, I think there's also another nuance in there. It's kind of like a subset of your subset, if you will, in that there are many times when I expect someone is going to be doing something simply because I have every reason to believe they're going to do it. But there's also expecting somebody else to do something because I need them to do it.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about. Like my need has to drive that thing to happen. And so therefore I'm going to attract it. I'm going to wave my magic wand and I'm going to attract this thing so that I don't have to be dealing with this horrible thing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's when you phrase it that way, it's like, what are you talking about?
Well, and that, you know, as human beings, we the emotional side of humans often, where we get stuck, I've done this so much for you. I've done so much for you.
Mm,
And I'm expecting you to do a small bit back and you don't do that,
hmm
then my expectations are, like, wow, those were unhealthy expectations. See, anytime I do anything for anyone, I try not to have any ulterior motive. I'm doing it because I want to do it. I'm not wanting anything back. The
hmm
moment I'm starting to do something because I want something back, then I'm almost always set up for, squashed expectations because they're not going to do it that way. And, it's always, as you're saying, the nuance when, if it's somebody who's working for me or somebody's on a project, now I'm expecting them to do what they're supposed, because that is their job. Now,
hmm
that's a different thing, because that is they're being told you will do this. If they don't do that, then I have to deal with that as a manager of people, of how to deal with that. That's a sort of a different category altogether. But expectations in general are, I expect myself to perform very strong. I'm always very strong in the gym. I expect that. I expect to be well tomorrow. I don't expect to get up with an upset stomach or a headache. I expect to get up in a good, healthy mindset. I'm expecting to have 9 sessions scheduled tomorrow. I'm expected to go do that. Those are things that that's where healthy expectations lie, and then they help drive those realities. If you're expecting to get up and do it, it sort of does. It works. It goes that way.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It also occurs to me that there's really one. I'm not sure I'd call it a factor, an attribute. It's a characteristic, if you will, that kind of defines the unhealthy form of expectation.
Yes.
Because what it really amounts to is, I expect you to do X or to be X, because if you're not, I'm going to be unhappy. But if you
Yes.
are, I'll be happy. In other words, my happiness is dependent upon whether or not you fulfill my expectation. That's
And
the problem.
that is a problem. That's also a form of codependence,
Yeah, no
where,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. So when you have expectations, and it's very normal. Like, I'm wanting, somebody you love or somebody you care about. I'm expecting them to behave a certain way. Uh, I have to accept. I work with parents all the time who are expecting their kids to do the traditional, I want them to do this thing.
hmm
And, very seldom do kids do what you want them to do.
Hmm.
And I've noticed a big trend recently over the years. A lot of young people are pushing back on the stereotypical, I'm going to graduate high school, I'm going to go to the university of our choice, and I'm going to graduate there, then go to work for a company similar to my dad's, and go put in my 30 years and retire with a nice lake house. I mean, that's the old way of doing it, and a lot of families for years relied upon that being the repeated expectation.
Hmm.
Um, the expectation years ago, when uh, I went to work for my dad in the insurance, it was expected I would go work for my dad in the insurance business. I didn't want to go work for my dad in the insurance business. It was just expected.
Yeah,
I
there
didn't
was,
think
whether you wanted to do it was really irrelevant.
yeah, nobody ever really asked that.
Right.
It was just what I would do. My dad, after I was done with school, he said, "Look, take the summer, and then you'll start in August." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." It was never asked, "Are you going to work here?" And
Mhm.
now, to be fair, that didn't work out too well at all.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was.
Read the bench if you aren't sure. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it didn't end up well. However, I had a lot of unmet expectations of my parents, and
Mm.
uh, that I'm sure they were very disappointed for a very long time. But in the long run, they got to see the turnaround. They got to see what
Mm.
happened, and my expectations of myself. I hold myself to a really high standard, and I try don't hold anyone else to a high standard at all. Doesn't mean I don't support people.
Sure.
I'm certainly always encourage people, always ask people to set their own expectations, but I can't. My son Justin, he's had an amazing. I might have him on the show soon just to show some of the stuff he's been through. I don't want to share all that
Wow.
with him, but he's really had when he turned 18, he's had a sort of a rough 18. I'm
Mm.
getting used to being 18 and an adult, and I'm very much okay. Well, let's see how that works for you.
Hmm.
I allow success, I allow failure, and I allow consequences from both.
Hmm.
And so he's had a really good, he has a really good story underway right now. He's doing really well.
Good for
Um,
him.
but if I told him, I don't have any expectations other than you figuring out what you want to do, figuring out how you're going to do it, and I'm there to support you, but I'm not there to tell you the pathway. You get to, if you want advice, I'll give it to you, but you get to figure this out. It's working really well for him.
It's a great way to parent. I mean, it's admirable. And like you suggest, it's something that many parents do have trouble with. The guest I had earlier today was talking about how she was challenged when she was raising her son in that exact same way. That the time came when she realized, through the help of a mentor, actually, the mentor was the one who suggested it to her, that she not only couldn't protect him from himself, but shouldn't protect him from himself, which was kind of an eye-opening thought for her. But give her credit, she actually stepped back, let him go through his thing, trip over his own feet. And in her own words, he's an amazing young man today. So, clearly another example of, you let them do that. You let people follow their own nose, even if that leads them right into a stone wall. They get better because of it. This is a theme we've talked about a lot. You and I have talked about it a lot.
Yes.
I've talked about it with Anne Marie, with Jody Lynn, with guests, that you have to go through the various things that basically you screw up on in order to learn from them. And the ones who have the hardest time are the ones who are never experiencing any opportunity to screw up.
Well, and that's exactly the what I find, all the people I work with over the years, the young people, and even my personal life, my individual journey is mine to do. And I have to figure it out. Everything that ever happened to me, good, bad, and ugly, was part of that process that got me to where I'm at. And for the longest time, my parents did what most parents do. They tried to, shield me from the consequences. And the process began to really set everything in motion. When they quit doing that, then I had to figure it out. There was nobody coming to save me.
Right.
There was no magical force at play. It was going to be me. And once I did that and I started having success, then I realized, I attribute that decision of my parents as, then I know how hard it was for them. They've never done anything more loving or caring than doing that, because every single thing I have today is built on that one decision. That was the foundation. Now, if you know the whole story, it got really bad. It didn't like they made that decision and things were great. That decision led to a bunch of bad stuff, but it's what made me sort of pull myself up and fight my way back and made me the man I am today. So, and made me develop the expectations of having myself. And, when you get enough, once you start fulfilling your own expectations long enough, then it almost becomes, I don't doubt success. I don't worry about success. My expectations of continued success, I don't always know how to work out. It just always works out in an incredible way. And and I always try to be grateful and remind myself, well, that was certainly easy. Life has become, it's easy. It really is. I know that's, a counterintuitive message that's being, told to us overall, but it's exciting to me that I've gotten to a place where my expectations are always, they're always met. And I just keep trying to have higher expectations.
It reminds me of some advertising performed by the online office supply company Staples. They advertised the easy button. And they advertised that for about a year and a half, and then they stopped because people didn't believe it.
Yeah.
They thought it was just a joke. They thought it was just silly.
Right.
They didn't realize that they were actually advertising truth.
Well, they were, and life, the analogy that you'll hear often, and I've mentioned this concept several times to you. I see this quote along, you've been assigned this mountain because it's yours to move. It's your job to, that's what your mountain is, what you were assigned to move. That's your challenge in life. And, I often tell people the first mountain almost killed me. It just, it was incredible. How I overcame it to this day, it doesn't, the story. It's like, is it even plausible that happened? But it did.
I've asked you point blank, how did that happen at the key turning point? And you couldn't really give me a clear answer. You tried, you gave your best answer, but
but it's no real, I don't even know. But what happens after that, and I feel this way. Now, every other mountain just gets the hell out of the way now. It doesn't, it's like, no, we don't want nothing to do with that. It's just there's no mountains left. It's just, whatever it is, I can handle it now.
It's appropriate because you actually have a picture of Smith Mountain behind you. So your mountain is
Yes.
behind you.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
appropriate. Just
Oh,
like I
wow.
have the universe has my back. It's the same deal.
Yeah, same thing.
Mhm.
And you know, once you realize you're capable of handling every single thing the universe can throw at you, you're already equipped. You don't need to go, you know, find some hidden power. It's already there. Just being able to trust the process, do it, and expect the outcome. Expect there's a one of these crazy televangelists, Oral Roberts, years ago, not his
Mm.
crazy son, but just the crazy dad. He wrote a book called Expect a Miracle.
Mm.
And now it was actually it wasn't a bad book about the law of attraction. Now he was trying to get you to send a bunch of money so he could, you know, buy a new jet or something.
Well,
But
you did specify crazy, so I get it.
yeah. But the overall concept of expect a miracle wasn't far off.
Mm. Yeah.
It was, you know, sort of his motivation was a little shady,
Mm.
but it was not, you know, the expect a miracle, expect things to work out, expect good health, expect you know, great relationships, and it's always provided. It's just that ability to see it, to accept it, and you know, keep expecting more. I expect to continue to have the incredible life that I have. And now, with that, somebody may ask, "Do you think there won't be any more problems?" No, I'll have. Oh no, I'll have a ton of problems, but I know factually I'll overcome each one of them with very little effort. You know, things will always work out.
Which is an interesting observation because when we experience problems, they wouldn't be problems unless they seemed insoluble at the moment.
Right.
At the moment that they're soluble, they're no longer a problem.
Right. Yeah.
So that's really the crux of it. We're dealing with things that at the moment they seem insoluble,
Right.
and yet they turn out not to be.
Well, and it's like when you break something down. So I have I've had several of these clients, but one that I'm working with recently, he's a hoarder and has not
Mhm.
left his house in a few years. This is like the third or fourth person I've worked with like this.
Mhm.
And so some doctor in town recommended that he get hold of me, and I went to see him. And his house was just like you think a hoarder's house would be. There's newspapers stacked up. There's cat feces everywhere.
Mm.
It's just there's useless junk. There's like pathways to different rooms,
Wow.
and when you first look at it, it's just incredibly overwhelming, and
Mm.
you're like, okay, this can't be done. And so first of all, we have to psychologically get him really well, you know, because in his mind, he believes some of this stuff one day may have some value, or that,
Oh yeah.
you
Hmm.
know, like those 1990 editions of the Tampa Bay Tribune, which
Yeah.
doesn't even exist anymore. Somehow there might be value in that, or
Right.
the
Right.
Richmond Times Dispatch, or whatever paper he had in his house. So within that, you have to first mentally get them prepared to be able to do it. But so what we did, and this technique works really well with these kind of situations. And I just had my vehicle, and I said, look, why don't we put a rope around this section? I have about a 10-foot rope. I just put a rope around one section of these papers. I said, why don't we just get these papers out of here? You agree these old papers have no value? He goes, yeah, I can give that. Yeah. So we put those in the back of my car. I dropped them by the dump. Now we have about a 5 foot by 5 foot area that's totally clear.
Well, that's improvement.
So his dad, who is supporting this whole effort, I asked him to have one of those dumpsters delivered to his driveway.
Mm.
And so what I challenged him to do every day is to take that rope and just put it without regard to what's in the pile. Just we
Ah.
got to get it, doesn't matter. And he agreed to that process. And so I told him I'd be back in a week, and I hope he has 5 piles removed,
Mm.
which would have been about one entire little room that was in. So I didn't hear from him. I expected to go again, expectations. I sort of expected him to not do anything.
Mm.
So, based on other people with this, so I called him, said I'm on my way. So when I get there, this dumpster is really full. I mean, it is
Wow.
way fuller. And I was like, oh my gosh. I walk in on the ground floor, and he has an upstairs where he was still working on. The ground floor was done. I mean, it was
Wow.
emptied out. If it was
Good
like
for him.
I was in shock, and he said and he used that term. He said, my expectations is that this was insurmountable. But what we did with the rope gave me little by little, it wasn't. And he said it turned out to be. He used the word. It wasn't insurmountable. It was very surmountable.
Insurmountable, yeah.
And I don't know if that works or not, but that's what he said.
I'll go with it. That's
Yeah.
okay with me. I like
Yeah.
surmountable.
Yeah, and so he was able to get it all cleaned out, and then of course we eventually did the upstairs, and all it started with him changing his expectations from something that couldn't be done to the expectations, and then like he said, he said we got this done in 2 week period,
Yeah.
and I thought this would never get done, and
Yeah.
with that gave him the freedom in his mind to start going outside. And it changed everything. But that he realized, he said, the biggest thing I learned was to change my expectations of myself, not of the situation, but expectations of me.
You're bringing to mind something that happened toward the end of my father's life. My dad had Parkinson's disease, and anyone knows about that one knows that doesn't end very nicely. I won't go into that part of it, but in the last couple of years, he needed help. They were living actually where in your background. They were living on Smith Mountain Lake, and they were getting ready to move into Lynchburg into a senior facility. And my dad was always the one who did all the planning for a move, the packing of the move, the actual move itself. I mean, he did the whole thing soup to nuts. And he reached a point in his life where he couldn't do any of it anymore, which really, really gnawed at him. So that's one of the reasons that I showed up, and my brother and my sister, and we were all pitching in and just helping them do stuff like that. And a large portion of it was the sorting out, right? Because when you go through something like that kind of a move, there's a downsizing that happens. And they'd already gone through a downsizing a few years before, but this was the latest downsize. And the thing that really sticks in my mind about it is there was a small number of things that we just couldn't get him to make a decision about. So we just put them aside, and we worked on the things that he could make a decision on. Yes, I want to keep that. No, I want to throw that out, all that kind of thing. And we whittled away until we got down to one box, which was the collection of things that he couldn't make a decision on. And then I had to have the conversation with him. Okay, how do we decide what to do with this box? Do we keep it? Do we get rid of it? Do we, what are we going to keep here? What are we going to discard? And he sat there for the longest time. I was trying to give him space and give him support and so forth. And he finally said, with more emotion than my father ever. My father was a not super emotional guy, but he was not emotionally hidden either. He was, especially for his era, he was fairly emotionally available. He got more emotional in that moment than I'd ever seen him in my life. And that's not an understatement. Or an overstatement, rather. That's not an exaggeration. He was overcome. And he looked at me, and this is really ironic because I'm named after my dad. So he was calling me by his own name, but he says, Walt, I can't do it. I can't make the decision.
Wow.
And that I had to say to him what I was trying to avoid saying, but I could just tell that he needed me to say it. That's okay, Dad. Go in the other room. I'll make the decision for you.
Yeah.
Which is what he did.
Yeah. Wow.
But,
powerful.
I mean, that was just, and it's not like there was anything in the box that was terribly consequential from anyone else's perspective, but from his perspective, it was huge.
Sure. And that's a great point. When and that a lot of that, everything you're describing there is, the stuff that's easy to get rid of, but just that final decision. And what a tough moment. And the fact he was able, I give him great credit for saying that. Actually, I don't know, I don't know how to make a decision. I can't. That was big.
Well, I had to kind of coax him a little bit on it because he couldn't say anything. He was literally locked. And I said, Dad, would you like me to make the decision for you?
Okay. Yeah.
And he said yes. He was able to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that's sort of transpiring in my life right now, I've been slowly getting stuff out of my house. I'm preparing for a move at some point. Nothing set yet, but I've been wanting. I moved into this house with the expectation of being here 5 years, and that's been about 14 years ago. So,
So it's a little past deadline.
Yeah, a little past deadline. So I've been getting stuff out of there, and so what my strategy is, I'm throwing absolutely everything away. Just everything, and I'll buy new stuff. And one of the weird things that was hard to do is I have pictures of TJ and stuff that You know, all my pictures have been backed up on a hard drive. And also they're in the cloud. They're on a flash drive. So I have my pictures scanned and, in fact, improved. They're better pictures that have been scanned. I had somebody that did it professionally and touched up my photos. So I have every photo that my mom ever took of me, my sister, my kids. I have all that available online. But the hard photos, the actual photos, uh, I can't throw those away. And even though I logically know I have them in 15 different places, but they won't go. They
Yeah.
won't leave. And I get it. I understand why. There's an attachment to that. But the rest of the stuff, there is no emotional attachment to anything else.
Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you can essentially move all of the less important stuff out of the way and find the part that's really essentially important to you for whatever the reason. It doesn't even matter what the reason is.
Yes.
But like you say, there is an attachment there, and I think it's almost an understatement. It's not just an attachment; it's an attachment. It's like total, complete human, life-driven attachment.
Yes.
I mean, it's such an and I even have experienced it with my dad's stuff vicariously, because I did keep a small amount of what was in that box for myself, and I ended up disposing of the rest of it. But I kept little tiny pieces of it, and to this day I can't let go of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even my stuff. That's what's so odd about it. It wasn't even my stuff.
But there's meaning to the stuff. Now you can debate, is there meaning, or are you putting meaning? It doesn't matter. It does have meaning, and there's no reason to get rid of it. It's okay. There's no harm in keeping it.
No, there's no harm in keeping it. I mean, I kind of shake my head at some of it.
Sometimes. But my in fact, when I explained to my mom years ago, when she had boxes of these pictures, she wanted to send them to me, and I'm like, do not send all those pictures up here. Do not. I had a guy go by and pick up the boxes and scan them for me, and do all that. And then I said, "What do you?" I said, "Every picture you have in that box, everything has been scanned, has been improved. They all look better. That they're amazing what they can do with these old pictures." And I showed him. I said, "Showed her, so you have access to these, and I put them on her iPad and all these things for her, so they're there forever, as many as you want." And she said, "But so what do I do with these pictures?" I said, "Just throw them away." And she said, "Wow." And she couldn't. And then when she passed away, I was able to do that. But it is amazing how those things will sort of stay there.
Especially photos. I mean, I have a similar photo because my father was the photographer in the family, not surprisingly. And he had a preference for what they call slides, photographic slides. So almost all the photos that we have were on slides.
Yes.
Which created an interesting emotional problem for my mom after my dad passed. Because in order to view the slides, you had to have a slide projector.
Right.
And a screen and all that kind of stuff. And by that point, we didn't have that. So when it came time to deciding what to do with these albums of slides that we had, and we had many albums of them, my mom very emotionally said, they don't do me any good. Right. She wanted to be able to see them, but she couldn't see them.
Right.
So it was actually torture to keep them around.
Oh, good point.
Fortunately, at the time of their 50th wedding anniversary, I had taken that slide collection, unbeknownst to them, and made scans, kind of similar to what you had your friend do. There's a way you can scan slides into a computer as well. And so I had selectively, I curated the ones that were the good shots and scanned those. So I have those in digitized form because I used those to create a slideshow for their 50th anniversary.
Oh, nice.
It was a special gift for them. And my mom would never make the connection consciously or verbally to what we had talked about with the photo album. But almost to the day she died, she would watch that video that I'd created over and over and over again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you, there's it tying into the topic, when you have any item, photos are the great example, but they are what they represent. Like if I see a photo of some some random person in their family. I have zero emotional attachment to that. I don't know who they are. It's a photo of people. So there's nothing. So again, along with expectations, also with, what is your perspective? What value do you put in that? And who does it belong to? And, one of the things, I had this weird thing happen many years ago. When we first moved up from South Carolina here, I rented this townhome because I didn't know the area too well. Before I bought, I wanted to know where we were at. So I rented this little townhome, and we were there for a year before I bought this place. And so, it was nice and, very, nothing wrong with it, but just a small little townhome. And so after about a year here, I knew many, many people, and, you met people. I became part of community. So one of my son Chris was living with me at the time. And so one of his really good friends, his name was Aaron. And so when we went to move out of that townhome, I had some stuff that had fallen behind the refrigerator. So we pulled the refrigerator out. And so we pulled the refrigerator out, there was a picture under the refrigerator. And it was a picture of his friend Aaron, but Aaron at that time was about 12. This was a picture of him about 5. He was about 5. And I'm like, how is that
for 1
here?
year? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand. So I know the mom. I said, look, I found this picture. And she goes, where do you guys live? And I told her, and she goes, oh my God, we lived there before we bought our house. And so I found this picture of her son from 7 years before that had been under the refrigerator that entire time.
Wow.
And so she's like, oh my God, I don't have a lot of pictures. Thank you for showing, and it had value to her. And now, and the point is, if I were just cleaning that out, it's just some random kid. I wouldn't have, but I knew that kid. I go, why do we have a picture of this kid?
Right.
We didn't know him when he was 5, but it was clearly that kid.
Yeah.
And so you see that connect. I was fascinated by that synchronicity there. But the picture to her had great value, and it had no value to me until I knew who it was.
It kind of makes me want to bring it back to the main topic that we started the program with, which is the topic of expectation. Yes. And the reason it makes me want to come back to that is somebody had an expectation somewhere in there, one that you didn't know about.
Right.
You were more the messenger or the mechanism for making that expectation come true. But somebody had an expectation going on there.
I agree. I agree. And when if I ask you, what are you expecting for this week to happen? You're going to tell me, I have work to do. I have this project I'm working on. I got these things. Those are expectations of what you have coming on. But then, if we talk a week from today, which we likely will, and I say, Walt, what happened last week that you didn't expect? and then you're gonna, there'll be some things you didn't expect to happen, and it won't be good or bad necessarily. It'll be your perspective of it at the time. So we have existing within expectations are the unexpected thing that happen, which where expectations could benefit that is understanding I'm expecting unexpected things this week.
That's actually a very important point, and it leads very nicely into something I wanted to bring in, which is that when you allow your expectations to essentially open up, that's kind of what we're talking about there. You don't limit them so tightly that it has to be this and only this thing. But when you open them up, it leads to what are often called serendipities. It leads to unexpected results that kind of pop up out of nowhere.
Yes.
And it's kind of cool when I actually had something like that happen today. And I was talking about it earlier on the other program that I recorded today with Anne Marie. But I've told you off camera. I think I may have mentioned it on camera. I can't remember for sure. But I've been dealing with low-grade headaches on a chronic basis for like the last 6-9 months, something like that. And I've been trying to find ways to overcome it. The mainstream medical people I have talked to about it have basically dismissed the whole thing as I'm just an older guy, so I have to deal with it. And my reaction is, yeah, right. So I move on to the alternative medicine people, and I've been getting some help there. I have a naturopathic, an ND, who is working with me nutritionally trying to help me identify. I've identified there's been some food sensitivities I didn't know about, so that's been good. But I still haven't been able to completely lick the headaches. And so I was looking at what are my electrolytes? How am I doing in terms of electrolyte intake? Because I distill my own water, so maybe there's something going on there. And I'm investigating all this kind of thing, and then I have this new diet I'm experimenting with that my ND suggested that I engage in. So I'm making all these changes and trying to identify what's it going to take to get to the point where I don't have these chronic low grade headaches going on. Well, today I thought to myself, I wonder if I like using artificial intelligence. I wonder if the artificial intelligence programs that I use could help me identify some of these things. So I got plugged in and did my usual thing and asked questions and so forth. And all of a sudden I had this inspiration that came to me that I hadn't thought about before. I said, if I give you what I'm eating and drinking throughout the day, can you just take that and turn that into a nutritional chart and tell me how much vitamin B3 I'm getting and how much protein I'm getting and all this other kind of stuff? And it said, yeah, I can do that. I said, cool, I like that. So all I have to do throughout the day is just get my app and say, well, I just had myself a bowl of cereal, plug that in. And like, okay, great. I love it. So I started doing that. And I did it because the reason I was first inspired to do it was because I figured it'd be a good way to find out how my electrolytes are doing.
Sure.
What I didn't expect, but which has been proving out through the day, and the day isn't done yet, but I've pretty much done most of my meals for the day. I didn't expect that it was going to show me vitamin deficiencies because I've been eating pretty good, especially since I got on this new diet. But I have come because of this experience of basically giving the data to the AI and let it calculate it all out for me. I've come to a realization of just how hard it is to get B vitamins from natural food sources. I mean, I knew it was kind of tough, but man, it's tough. And then you want to make it even more difficult. I have an egg sensitivity. Eggs are one of the best sources of B vitamins. I can't have eggs. What am I going to do? And literally, I'm watching these little incremental numbers creep up during the day. Like, am I going to get to the goal? Am I going to get to that recommended daily allowance for that particular vitamin? And you know what? Some of them I'm not going to get there. I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if that's where the source of my headaches is, that B vitamins are so challenging to get from food sources. Now, I do have a supplement. I do take a vitamin supplement. So I'm getting vitamin that way. But I can make the argument that's not really great vitamin because it's in a powder form from a pill. Vitamins are part of your natural organic, chemistry. So that's where you really want to get them from. And so I'm zeroing in and I'm looking at them saying, wow, what do you have to eat in order to get those B vitamins? Well, long story short, what this is doing for me, I still haven't licked the problem of the B vitamins, but look what happened to starting with, I want to try to answer a question. I'll get AI to help me to do it. And all of a sudden I've discovered AI can track all of my food nutrients for me, basically giving me a food diary, which is a whole lot easier than actually doing a food diary. At zero cost. It doesn't cost me anything other than a few seconds each time that I eat something to plug this thing in. And then discovering something that I really wasn't expecting was behind my chronic condition. All because I was willing to open up my expectation a little bit.
I love that. And by the way, remind me, I will send you the organ meat is your answer.
I found that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a supplement that's freeze dried organ meats that you take in pill form that will give you
really freeze dried organ meat.
Yep, it's the answer to your question.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hey, now here's another example of it right here.
Yes.
Right. Now, I just laid out for you this whole scenario of showing how opening my expectation led to a result, and you just took it to the next level.
Yeah. I've taken this supplement for probably 7 years. It's the best on the market, very reasonably priced. Or anybody that wants it, seriously, if you email me, I make no money off of this, but I'll tell you which one I use. It's really good, and it covers all the B vitamins. I am not deficient in any B vitamin, B12 included, which is often a deficiency.
That's a hard one, yeah. B1, B2, also, B12 are really hard. B3 is tough. Niacin, that's a really tough one.
Yeah, this organ meats are full of it. So you have what the primary organ meat is liver, beef liver, that's in
Yeah,
powder
I saw
form.
that on the list.
Yeah, that it also gets into the heart, pancreas, and spleen of the cow, which has varying forms, higher than others. So it's a really cool supplement. It's all grass-fed meat, organs, really well sourced.
Oh, that's
Blah
good.
blah blah. Yeah, that's
That's
good.
good.
So that's an answer, and plus, likely because of soil depletion,
Yeah.
magnesium is probably low as well. Those are the two things that I think you're going to be low on.
My magnesium isn't too bad simply because I add that into my water supply.
Okay, so as long as you're adding it, but
Yeah.
if you go on nutritional value, if you look up what nutritional value of magnesium is and say spinach, it's often wrong because those formulas were created 15 years ago when our
Yeah.
soil wasn't so depleted.
Right.
So supplementing magnesium is really, really important. Vitamin D3, K2 go together.
Yeah.
Those are things that are all
I'm
part of it.
tracking those two in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but sorry to interrupt you with that, but that's
No.
that's
See,
exactly.
but this is a perfect example of what I was
Yes.
talking about. Your
Yes.
expectation, when you open up the expectation and not make it so limited, new things come in, and you just demonstrated for our audience in the middle of my conversation with you. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So this is, and what I love about it is when when you're doing it like you're doing it, you take this. I'm not a big fan of Western medicine because we talked about that a lot. Don't know but when you look at the origins, the human body is intended to function very well to old age. There's really nothing about aging that says you're supposed to fall apart the way that we do tend to fall apart. So when you look at what nature intended, eggs, like you're saying, I told you I eat a lot of eggs. I mean, eggs are I eat according to traditional medicine. I'm really stupid because I eat so many eggs. But
according to traditional medicine, you probably should be dead by now.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, my cholesterol is absolutely perfect. But eggs but if you egg sensitivity, you got to watch that. So eggs are nature's multivitamin. Organ meat is nature's second multivitamin. So
yeah, good stuff. I like that.
Yeah.
Something else that I was noticing too. Sure, it just kind of skipped out of my head as soon as I started to say it. What was it that I was just going to bring in? It'll come back in a few minutes. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, well, it'll circle back the way the brain works. But the expectations, that what you just did is another expectations. Instead of just trying to you said, hey, let me ask AI, see what it says. So one thing leads to another, the synchronicity of all that, how that one thing, then we have this conversation. See, this is exactly the connectivity that we've been talking about all the time. This is law of attraction at play. It's also law of action. Have you ever mentioned I'm writing a book called The Law of Action? Have I mentioned
you did
that?
mention I'm waiting for it to be released, but I'm glad to hear it's still under development. That's a good sign.
I need to follow the advice in the law of action to complete the law of action. That is the increment.
The problem right now is you have law of action volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. You need to condense down to volume 1. That's the problem.
I have so many things going, and this is a great problem. Not a problem. Well, I have a very busy life right now. I have for whatever reason my clientele load is just it's way up there. I'm trying to cut back, and they just keep showing up, and a lot of them are people that really need me. So I'm having a hard time saying no. I'll eventually get to that, but I'm not getting any of my other projects done right now. It's all work. So, and that's not a bad thing. I love what I do. So it's not a bad
when you're
problem.
Smiling as you're saying it, I know it's not a bad thing. I mean, you're happy with the way it's going.
Yeah. It's like I'm one of these people. I wish we had about 40 hours in a day. That would be great. I would like to petition to increase the length of the day.
Somehow that's appropriate during election season. I won't go any further on that one.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. Yeah. Yeah. But so with the overall belief system. So one of the things that we just did with your little your incredible idea of the AI search, and I love how you use AI for everything. That you do it really well, and so that led to you finding something that led to our conversation.
Yeah,
somebody's going to be listening to this, and that will lead them to something. That will lead, and we will just be able to keep this ripple in the water will go for a long time because that's how this works. And the expectation, the collaborative nature of what we're trying to do here. You and I started talking, I don't know, years ago, 12 years ago, is it?
12 years
Something like
ago.
that.
12 years
Yeah.
ago this month, actually, is
Oh,
when,
wow.
when I
Yeah.
started, and you and I conversed in December of that year. So 4 months away from now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's impressive. And so we were doing that, and that we had no expectations of this. We didn't know, the first time we talked, that you were just interviewing me for the job I was at using the law of attraction with
Pretty
addiction
much, yeah.
medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. And what the way I even found you, that was another example of expectation and how the expectation game plays if you're willing to be open about it. Because all I had done, I mean, like I've told many times, this is a podcast that I started before Zoom. YouTube hardly was anything at this point. It certainly was not something that you could broadcast to like you can today. The regular podcast channels, Apple Podcast was in its infancy. Almost nobody even knew what it was. Spotify, I don't think was even a spot on the pavement. I mean, it didn't even exist. All of these different podcast elements that we have today just weren't there.
Right.
I mean, there was no Zoom, there was no StreamYard, there was none of this stuff. The only thing that existed was that there were people who had realized that there was this thing called an iPod, and you could potentially create files of audio that could be uploaded and listened to by somebody else. So people would, get out their microphone and they'd say something to their microphone, and that became the basis of the first podcasts. Well, out of that rather crazy set of events, because that's really what that was, it was pretty crazy. I ended up putting together this podcast. You ended up joining in that podcast. And in the process, not only did we discover something that was damn fun to do, which is why we're continuing to do it to this day.
Sure.
But we ended up having people show up and listen to it and find that it was useful for them too. And it just became this swirl of events. So that here we sit 12 years later, look what came out of that one thing. And the only thing I expected when I started the podcast was I'm going to find somebody who can teach me why I'm having so many financial problems. Yeah. That was literally the only reason why I started it, as you know. Yes. And you were one of the people to come on as an expert to teach me why I was having so much trouble with this stuff. And look what came out of it. That was my only expectation. I had nothing. I had no other plan. I had no other hope for it. I had no belief that it was going to turn into anything. And look what it turned into.
And that's what ties exactly into the expectation process. In my book, The Law of Action, there's expectations has probably, I'm going to have to get it down to one chapter, but it's a bunch of chapters about expectation. So, because any intended expectation, and when I mean in a positive expectation, I'm expecting this. I'm expecting to find out why I'm struggling financially. Mm-hmm. When done properly, the expectation of that answer will lead to amazing things when you allow that to happen. When you want your financial situation fixed, or you want your perspective in relationships or your health, those are usually the main three things that people want to get into the law of attraction about. When you really start to realize that everything improves, as we've talked about a million times, but also it isn't just about the one thing or the financial thing. It's your mindset toward it all, because when the very mindset that had you asking the question, why am I struggling so much financially, was the problem. Mm-hmm. That was the loop you're in.
That's right.
But you were reinforcing I'm struggling financially.
And very well, I might add. I was doing a really good job of reinforcing it.
I mean,
I always say it's good to have a skill, and I was really skilled at that one.
Yeah, you really knocked that out of the park. So yeah, but you can see this is a great tool when you use it, and then once you have expectations of the thing, then you cannot believe it goes what it far exceeds my expectations. Mm-hmm. What comes after that?
Yes. It has an echo effect, is the best way I can think of to describe. It's kind of like being in a canyon. You shout hello at the canyon, and you hear hello, hello, hello.
Yeah.
It just continues ad infinitum. It just keeps going and going and going and going. Except that unlike in the canyon where the echo keeps fading over time, in life expectations enhance and amplify over time.
Yes.
That's one of the most fascinating parts from my perspective,
Yes.
that it actually amplifies. It doesn't degrade over time. Because you
Right.
talked about that ripple effect. That ripple effect, I think the ripple effect can actually very accurately describe why there is so much transition and progress and things that happen in life, because the ripples just keep growing and growing and growing. They keep increasing in number year after
Well,
year after year. There's more and more ripples.
well, and when you imagine, here's how I view this: when you tune into the frequency of abundance, and you get there. So as you're putting that out there, in the beginning, it's a pretty narrow path, and you start attracting, you start tuning into abundance.
Mhm.
Well, as that continues, then more and more abundance attaches. So it becomes it's fed from multiple avenues, multiple directions. So it whereas a ripple in the water eventually would sort of die out, this is an increasing ripple. It goes and it expands, and it really to a parabolic. It goes and goes and goes, and it what starts off in one direction can end up in entirely, if you follow it and allow it. So much of this is mindset. It's all mindset when you really realize it. But that expectation used properly can lead to everything. It's really amazing. But you also have to have the ability to see it, Walt.
Yes. Well, you have to either have the ability to see it, or at least the patience for the evidence to show up so you can see it.
Yes,
You may not be able
yes.
to see it up front.
Well, but you have to be aware of it.
Yes.
Of like, okay, I'm attracted, because for a long time my biggest struggle was money. It was all
Mm.
money was my big thing.
Mhm.
That which is sort of stereotypical for compulsive gamblers. We have money problems.
Yeah.
So money was my thing. Even when I got stopped gambling, money was still my problem.
Mhm.
And I worked hard. I kept saying, why can't I get ahead? And
Mhm.
and it was the narrative of why can't I get ahead? I'm working at the story I was telling myself was being reinforced. And once I
Mm.
changed that, then it could have happened much faster, but I had to then accept, wow, this is getting a little better. Maybe this is working. And then it really was working. And then you get to a place right now with my mindset. It's just money doesn't occupy space in my brain anymore. Doesn't matter.
Now,
You
something we've also talked about in the past, I want to bring it in here because I think it's also important. One of the traps, no, not traps. One of the, I'm not sure what the adjectives I'm going to use. It's an adjective that basically means a negative reason that makes you want to avoid. So whatever that word is, one of the reasons that we would want to avoid the expectation approach that we're talking about here is fear of being overwhelmed by it. Because like we're talking about, there's an amplification effect here. The ripples
Yes.
keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm wondering, do we on some level kind of feel like, wow, it's all going to overwhelm me? I'm going to have so much stuff coming through, I can't even keep up with it all. And I'll just get washed out to sea.
A variation of that, and you might be onto something. One of the things that I will, when I really look at somebody who's been stuck in life,
Hmm.
and they seem to be doing the right things but not quite, you try to figure it out. There's often a fear of success, because with
Hmm.
success, so I had this one young man tell me one time, I'm not really trying, because if I'm not really trying, I won't be disappointed. But if I'm really trying and I don't move forward, then I'm very disappointed. And also, if I do become successful, I'm a screw up, and I'll be exposed to screw up, and it's way
Mm-hmm.
too much. So it's better to stay where I'm at. But I'm still want to get there. But again, so all of that, there is a fear of success, comes responsibility, comes with different choices, comes with different things, and sometimes that is scary.
Mm-hmm. It is scary.
Yeah.
And it's one of those scary things that we look at and we say, well, yeah, I wouldn't actually block myself that way, even when we were blocking ourselves that way.
What there's nobody blocking themselves from abundance or relationships or health. Nobody is blocking themselves do it on purpose. Let's be clear. There's nobody that
Mm, good point.
I never like to say nobody. I'm unaware of anyone who is intentionally blocking themselves. Now,
Hmm.
you can talk to them about, okay, you're blocking yourself. It's pretty obvious, but I don't think most people. It's like I used the analogy the other day. Most people don't have. I'm unaware of any mother that ever delivered a baby and goes, you know, son, I'm going to screw you up as much as possible. I've never, I really don't believe that mom exists. However, I know a lot of women, a lot of moms who have really screwed up their kids way beyond that wasn't their intent, but it's what ended up happening. And so the idea that you get to choose your perspective of and your expectations, and when you manage them in a way that keeps it focused on you, it has to be about you, not the behavior of others, not other people's if you believe another person can make you happy, we're really stuck in the starting gate at that point.
Well, that kind of circles around to where we began, isn't it? Because that's what we were talking about at the very beginning, though, that false expectation that somebody else's actions must be a certain way in order for us to be happy.
Yeah. And then, that codependence, there's the Codependent No More book is by Melody Beatty it's the only book that I'm aware of, by the way, that every therapist I've ever known recommends.
Really?
It's universally sort of the Bible of codependence.
Wow.
It's most books people say, oh no, that there's going to be detractors. I've never heard anybody say that's not the best. It's just a great book. So Codependent No More talks about all this, and you're never going to be authentically happy if you believe your happiness is tied up in somebody else or a career or a job or a situation. That's the hard part. If geographical cures to problems don't work. Wherever you go, you still are there. So getting all this right allows all the rest to happen. So that expectation process fits right in with this.
So I got to ask you this question. This might be the appropriate way to end the show for today, but I keep expecting that every time that we do an episode, I'm going to love it.
Well, you're
you can kind of see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah. It's good, and but when we do a show, Walt, seriously, whatever, if anybody thinks that we spend a lot of time on preparation for the show.
Yeah, preparation is how's your mic doing?
Yeah, I come on about 5 minutes before, like, hey, do I do AirPod or whatever? Let's figure this out. We
how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? Oh, everything's going great. That's pretty much our prep.
Then you go, do you know what the topic is? And I go, either yes or no. That's what you say.
Yes, our prep is in depth, and we have a whole team of people helping us out.
But yet every show we do feels to me like it's perfectly in sync, and we get to where we need to be. Today's show, for example, incredible topic, and our audience has come. I think they have come to expect this from us, and you can tune in and we know where we don't really know where we're going, but we know we're going to get there. If that makes any sense.
I've quoted before. I'll bring it in again from the movie that came out a few years ago, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Everything's going to work out all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not yet the end.
It's not the end. It's not the end, and that is so accurate. So our anybody that's listening, any of our listeners right now, the idea that your expectation in you can remain high. Expectation of others needs to be removed.
Yeah.
Because that's where the disappointment lies. But great power in expecting a great life, expecting abundance, expecting health. Those are part of the law of it. Living as if those things exist as you expect them to be. The law of attraction responds very well to that mindset.
Well, I'll tell you what, I expect the next time you and I do this show, which will probably be a week from now, I'm going to have a good time doing it.
I promise you we'll get there. And another fact, this will be sort of an inside joke. I also have to go get eggs tonight.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of egg sensitivity, Walt and I, every time I get off the show, I said, Walt, I got to go get eggs. I know.
And this is not an exaggeration. This is like week after week after week, every single time.
Yeah.
We know Joel goes to get the eggs on Monday. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. The lady that grows the chickens give me my eggs. They're waiting for me after the show.
I love it. Well, you go get those eggs, and I'll see you next week, and we'll just keep doing our stuff here.
Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for everybody for being here tonight.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.